Okay, looks like we're live, everybody. Welcome to a recording of Living Free in Tennessee. I've got my glasses on. Looks like there's a couple of you already on. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me now? I haven't live streamed in like a month. Happy New Year. So today we're doing the follow-up on the Vin Armani show. It looks like my audio is working here. I'm seeing a level there. It's probably way better if I get up on it. Is it? Or is it coming through the computer? Okay, great. Thanks, Janet. Okay, so I wish there was a better way to do this mic thing. I may try to get a lav mic. Um, I have my headset on, but we'll take it off as soon as I get started on the show. If any of y'all are willing to just throw this sharing link on the groups for our people, that would be awesome. Wait, maybe I can do it. I just learned how to use YouTube just in time to like leave YouTube at some point. I am just as an announcement not going to be using Facebook as much as I have been. And that means that if you message me on Facebook and don't hear back, it's because I'm not there much. I don't always get, and the notifications are hinky. It's gotten worse and worse and worse. So I don't know. Okay, so we're live recording today, and I wanted to go back on Monday's episode. Some of you may not have had time to listen to the whole thing yet, but I mean, because I heard some grousing about it being 3 hours long. I was like, that was good conversation, and I didn't want to do part one and part two and end in the middle of that conversation with Ben. It didn't seem like a very good idea. So just I was like, we're gonna let her rip in January, just the whole thing. And so yeah. For those of you on YouTube, if you have questions, put them in all caps. I wrote that in the chat as well. I will look there from time to time, but I'm usually looking here at the camera and not there at the screen. I was hoping that my neighbor, the Tactical Redneck, would be home in time to help me with this so he could ask me questions. But alas, he had too much fun on his vacation and doesn't want to come back to his house very quickly. So he's not here yet. And nobody else is around either. If I make a terrible mistake, I do edit on the fly. So that means you guys get to watch me edit. And on the audio podcast later, it won't be there. So I am going to jump in, and that means hitting record. And you're going to hear me do the intro segments. Then we're going to jump into sort of that Q&A and discussion from the interview we did on the Coming Dim Age with Vin Armani. Well, welcome everyone to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you want to live on your terms. Today is Wednesday, January 6th, 2021. Today is certification day. Have you been paying attention to that? I can tell you what, I have not been paying attention to that at all. Zero, zilch, no reason to pay attention to it. What will happen by the end of today. And so instead of doing that, I it's Wednesday, so I set a really aggressive schedule for myself to get roasting done and podcast notes. And it's also Unloose the Goose Day, so I got that all together. It's been kind of a crazy one for me. I had about a 10-minute break before recording this live. I'm glad I scheduled it at one. I wanted to show you something, though, for those of you on the YouTube. This is my Christmas present from a friend, and it's an SOE Tactical. I don't know what this thing's called, but it like folds over my headset so that it makes the top of my head not hurt as much when that band is pushing down. I think they're actually designed for hearing protection for shooting. So I had a lot of shooting related Christmas gifts this year, which was kind of funny. Anyway, Monday's show was 3 hours almost. Like I literally heard people saying, man, if Nicole's doing 3-hour shows, what am I going to do? Because I already listened to all these other podcasts. And don't worry. Don't worry. The good thing is that I usually do an hour show or 45 minutes or hour and 15. It was just that interview went on for quite a long time. And the path that it took it went to some dark places, really. And I think it's important to look at dark places so that we can build the life we want to live despite what's going on in our environment. And I could have split it into two, but no splitting it into two. So I thought a feedback show right after it would be a good idea. And a lot of you have reached out to me with feedback. Some of you haven't even listened to the show yet because some of you like catch up on the weekend. So if you're listening to this after the fact and you're like, I missed the feedback show, don't worry. You can still send me feedback. We're going to keep this conversation probably going through January as we share ideas and input and thoughts and process some of the things that we want to process as a network about the topic. And let's see, I want to talk about real community as well, because we kind of landed on Monday about how your best way to navigate instability is to have really good communities. And I want to talk about that and what it means because our prosperous US based society has done a really good job of changing what people perceive to be community, right? And that means that we have an idea of what community is, but we're not really doing it. It's sort of like community as defined by the US government or the local government or your corporatized neighborhood system. It's like this top down thing is community. And the goal of community is to be as big as possible. That's not the goal of community, guys. We'll talk about that on Friday because when I looked at all the feedback from Monday's show, I thought doing both topics, this could be another 3 or 4 hour show. We're not going to do that to you. So today is all about dim age feedback. I also will be inviting Vin back on the show to give, to respond to some of these things. I sent him a couple of pieces of feedback and I had already scheduled this live show at a time that doesn't really work for his time change. I think he might have jumped on had I done this a little later. So if we do a second feedback show, I'll schedule it with him first and then schedule it with y'all. For those of you on the live stream, I have this beautiful orange pumpkin plastic ring. This was given to me by a young man. Yep, that's right. He put a ring on it. A young man. I think he's 6 years old now. And I was visiting him at his house while I was visiting his parents and also him. And he gave me one of the coveted Halloween rings, and it's on my desk. So I tend to do things with my fingers while I'm talking on the podcast because I'm a kinesthetic processor. So if I'm moving, I process information better. And I try not to be like jittery on the screen on video, but like right below that line, my hands are like talking to y'all all the time. It's kind of funny. Anyway, before we jump into the main topics on today's show, the main content, I wanted to just go over some of the things we're doing here that are in part related to what we've been seeing societally for a long time, aka also what we were talking about on Monday's show. But just more generally, it's LFTN network stuff going on. First of all, there's a Freedom Cell meetup in East Tennessee on Roan Mountain. And if you want to sign up for that, go to livingfreeintennessee.com. If you scroll down, there's a post about the Freedom Cell meetup. It's called Freedom Cell Meetup. If you can't find that, type Freedom Cell Meetup in the sidebar or go to the show notes, and I have a link to it in the show notes. But we're getting together on the 16th just to go over some topics like wild edible food, building community. The whole purpose, the core purpose of this is for us to all meet each other. It costs $25 to offset food and beverage. And we've been really lucky that our location, the venue, has donated a hiker hostel. So if you're driving like from way far away, like I am, and need to overnight, you can. The hiker hostel is very conveniently right next door to a pub owned by the same person. So we'll be hanging out there Friday before and Saturday after. I'm going to turn off accepting any registrants on, I guess, Sunday this weekend. I have been adding tickets as I find out when people are just day tripping, that means I still have a bed, right? So then I add one more ticket. So if you go there and there's no tickets, like reach out to me because it's possible I just haven't gone back through to see how many beds we have left. Also, the Greater Reset Conference is coming. You've all heard of the Great Reset, right? That's where like the technocracy takes over and we eliminate privacy and private property, thus all becoming slaves of a technocratic elite. Great idea. They have a website. They're for real, guys. People actually they literally have a website where they've written out what they want to do. And what they want to do to me sounds terrible. It sounds terrible. And so some friends of mine put together a different conference called the Greater Reset Conference. It's running at the same time. It's digital. So sessions will be happening over that. We're going to talk about community. We're going to talk about cryptocurrency. We're going to talk about building a world that we all own from the bottom up rather than controlling everybody as little slaves from the top down. Because right now we're poised in a time where we can flip over to pain and suffering, or we can run things the way we want them, right? And it's kind of like freedom is within you and it's a choice. That's the idea. That's the idea. So that conference, I have the link in the show notes. If you're interested in hearing about it, you go to thegreaterreset.net. That's the website. Sign up and you get emails about it. They're releasing the agenda later this week. And then I'll talk to y'all about the concept of watch parties because I might host one here. We'll see. I might host one somewhere else too. But, the idea being we can get together and watch these as a group and have some fun and talk about things in the background, or we can just sit in the comfort of our recording studio and watch them by ourselves with our fizzy water. It's up to you. I mean, I think it's more fun to get the fellowship of in-person interactions with people personally. So I'm sure we'll have something here, if not just holla neighbors, right? Getting together. And then the third thing, and this is partially in relationship to what I said in December, it's time to get your shit together. It's time to get your house in order. If you have not gotten your house in order yet, like, how have you not noticed all year long that you need to? Well, maybe you did and you just weren't sure what to do. We've been getting our house in order. Like, I was always getting the house in order and being prepared for the unknown and all of that. That's part of why this podcast exists. But as I watched things unfold last winter, I was so happy to be able to be growing my own lettuce and getting my own food from my property without having to go buy it, right? And then, the shutdowns weren't as bad anymore, and I kind of started going back to the grocery store, but I did it in a different way. I thought, you know what? Winter is coming again, and what if? So I started going through category by category. Well, I realized I kind of talked about getting our stuff in order over the course of last year, but I didn't give y'all real tangible stuff to do. So this year there's one focus every month. And this year we're just going through and auditing and then taking care of things that need to be taken care of. And what January's audit is all about is not growing lettuce in my kitchen, which is a task I'm doing, but I already know how to do that, right? So I don't need to personally add that. You may need to add that to yours. And actually, it's way cheaper, by the way, than buying lettuce at the store. But what we realized when we did a SWOT analysis of everything that's going on in our immediate neighborhood, community, and personally, as a Holler neighborhood, we realized that we need to get our documentation in order. So this month, Saturdays in the morning, sitting at the dining room table getting my documentation in order. I live in a community of people who hate paperwork, as do I. But having that documentation means you have a record if the internet goes out of what you need to have access to. You have a record if you have maps on how to go see your friends if GPS isn't working. You have a record of your cryptocurrency and how to get it if your phone stops working, right? So this Saturday, I'm starting actually with bank accounts and cryptocurrency and making sure I know where they are, passwords, account numbers, getting that all together and storing it in a way that is not exposed. So I'm not going to put it on a Google Doc, right? But getting that all together, as well as making sure I understand my backups for my cryptocurrency. I understand what's at risk or not. Like, I am the person who used Cointext in it, like when it first came out. And then when they announced that they're not going to support that anymore, didn't notice. And now I don't have access to that anymore. Okay. Well, in the meantime, cryptocurrencies exploded through the roof. So I have no idea how much money I left on the table there, but it was probably a decent amount. So that was dumb. I'm not going to get caught with my pants down again on that one. I'm going to make sure I know what to do with my XRP. By the way, if you have XRP and you bought it on an exchange and the exchange is delisting it, you need to move it off that exchange somewhere else. Just saying. So that's one of those things that's like stuff just needs to be handled. The other kind of documentation I'm putting in order is I'm looking at our network, our LFTN network, and saying, if I need to leave here and go there, right? Because of whatever happens here. Um, how do I get there? And are there places I can stay? And do I need to maybe leave some money or some food or some clothing along the way? And then if do I know how to get there? Do I know how to get there if I'm not hooked up to GPS? So I've got a road atlas and I'm marking out just sort of key areas in Tennessee as well as, thinking about what if I have to get out of state? What if I have to get further away? What other waypoints are there? So that's what I'm talking about, getting my documentation in order. Once I have that, then in February we can take the next step, right? Documentation will be in order. Maybe we'll audit one part of our pantry or we'll look at our energy independence. I'm not sure, but I just wanted to share it with you and also encourage you to do the same thing. So this month is January. Get your documentation in order. Holler Hat Wednesday. Guess what? I'm not doing Holler Hat Wednesday anymore. It may come back on other social platforms, but I did that because Instagram is a pretty visual platform. And if you put pictures up there, it's kind of cool. And I got some interaction on it. It's fun to take pictures of the Holler Hat, but Instagram has changed their terms of use enough that I'm not comfortable using it at all. I'm still using it for Holler Roast Coffee, but I'm not getting much from it anyway. So for Holler Roast Coffee. So I may leave that platform completely. And I was mentioning on the YouTube live stream before I started recording the podcast, not sure how much longer I'm going to be on Facebook very much. I am supporting bad behavior by participating in social networks that abuse people. And it's abuse what's happening now, in my opinion. So why would I be there? Well, because it's a promotional arm and it helps build my business. So I've been doing a lot of soul searching about that. And, first of all, if you are staking your life on a platform that you do not have control of, like you sell all your stuff on Facebook and nowhere else, think about that. That is a light switch that can be turned off. It's a light switch that can be turned off. So um, start taking steps to not be 100% dependent on any platform. WordPress.org, Facebook, Parlor, me. We don't be dependent on any of those platforms. They are tools. They are tools to communicate and interact with people, and they are tools of promotion if you're promoting your business. But ultimately, you want to own that customer relationship and develop direct connections because you don't know what's going to happen with a platform. You don't know when it's going to be deplatformed or if they're going to suddenly have rules that you can't sell coffee because coffee causes cancer, according to California, and cancer causing things can't be sold on our platform because we serve customers in California and it does cause cancer in Cal. You see what I'm saying? Like that stuff happens all the time. And right now you might be, selling spice mixes or birdhouses and you're like, that'll never be a problem. And then next thing you know, they outlaw wooden things. Done. Done. Right. So just think about that if you're running a business. Finally, if you want to send feedback to me, you can, Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com or go to livingfreeintennessee.com. Click on contact, fill out the form. Those emails come straight to me. With that, it's time for our only segment of today's show before we jump into the topic. What's up in the garden? It's January. It was 25 degrees last night. They set a low of 26. I forgot to cover my aquaponics system until it was 30 degrees outside. So some of my plants got frosted, but luckily I'm growing like Swiss chard and parsley and sage and other things in there. I have one like random super dill plant in there that's still alive. That poor thing's been frosted like 4 times, but it's about a foot tall and shaggy and doing well. So hopefully that lived after me forgetting to cover it before I went into the house. Luckily, I got it covered at 30 degrees, so the freeze that continued to happen didn't happen. And there is warm water like flowing through there, not warm like 80-degree water, but 45-degree water going through the system. So that might have put a little heat back up under the plastic. I haven't actually been out to look under it today because it's been pretty cold today too. So what could possibly be up in my gardens? Well, first of all, I have moved to grocery shopping once a month and also have agreed to provide a large salad every time I cook dinner. So once a week, large salad for Holler neighbors. My greens growing in the house has not caught up to that need yet. I have plants that are ready to transplant today, and then I start new seedlings. And I have 2 heads of lettuce. 2 heads of lettuce will get me through one night. I am actually doing 2 nights this week because a friend was out of town and I took their night over. And guess what? Guess what? Yeah, you guessed what? You guessed what? I didn't buy greens at the grocery store this month. So then I've been like asking anybody who's going to the grocery store, "Are you going to the grocery store?" And so far they haven't been. And I thought, well, I can get a couple bags of kale because kale will last for 4 weeks in the fridge, right? And then I realized something. It's winter, but I live in Tennessee. There's not ice on the ground. Maybe there's some wild edible plants. And earlier this week, I just took a walk, went to the watercress patch. There was watercress. I was working in my gardens. I was seeing small spring greens that usually don't come out until February or March here. They're up. They're up. I don't know what that means. What I know is I have enough salad for 2 weeks right now just from that one walk. And also nature is telling me spring is coming. It's January 6th and spring is coming. Oh, but we get lulled into these things, and then we put our plants out, and then winter comes back and bam, wipes out all your plants. So I'm gonna start playing plant roulette, where I do seedlings of cheap things like I have like a pound of broccoli seeds, right? Because that's something I grow as a microgreen. So I'm gonna start broccoli and cauliflower, and I'm gonna put carrot seeds outside. I'm gonna do a bunch of stuff like that. I'm gonna spend probably $3 to $5. I might spend that much. It might only be $3. It might only be $2. Not very much money on seeds, and I'm gonna start some things, and eventually, if it looks like it's the right time, I'm gonna transplant them outside, and then if winter comes back and goes, I will have already started the seeds on the usual schedule I start them on for early spring planting, and I'll just retransplant the plants, reseed the carrots, reseed the radishes. But if we get an early spring, and where I live, we can get this early spring where by mid-February, we basically don't frost again, or we can frost in May. So it can be a little difficult to figure that out because some years it's like 90 degrees already and it's way too late for spring stuff, but I didn't put my spring stuff out in January because, well, oh, peas are going out too. So yeah, we're playing plant roulette already. I've been getting the garden beds ready and planted the rest of my fall flower bulbs that I did not get done because of the coffee rush. So that's the same thing. Like I bought the bulbs, they're not dead. Might as well put them in the ground and see if anything happens. I mulched those areas really well just to kind of keep the extreme soil temperatures from changing. I could have started them in pots in my house, but that was going to be too much work. So I just decided to pull a flyer and go for it. The good news is I got my saffron, whatever lilies or whatever it is, in the ground on schedule. So that was good. And then I am mulching around some of the early spring plants that I'm finding. I'm also marking them so nobody accidentally digs up like my bergamot or anything. And then, yeah, just preparing things as weather permits because once it comes time to plant, it's like you have zero time to think and you're just after it. And I've been reading John Moody's Winning the War on Weeds book because I bought that last year at the Rogue Food Conference and then didn't read it. Well, I've been reading it and I'm reading a chapter every morning before I start my day. Today I got 2 chapters in because they were short. And doing that so I can get a better leg up on weeds. And if you have not checked out that book, I'm just going to say, he doesn't pay me any money or anything, but I recommend, like, if you, like me, have a problem with weeds, read that book and really absorb it. He's a really good writer, and there's some good information in there. And he talks about things that if you're not quite sure how to do them, even after reading the book, you can go research more once you have the terminology. So definitely recommend that one. Okay, with that, it is time for the main topic of today's show. Oh, I have a question from YouTube. Do you put an honesty stall to sell extra produce? This is about gardening from Jaggy on YouTube. No, I don't have like an area to buy stuff out front of the homestead. That's something that over time, as we, as the Holler neighbors, talk about getting revenue for our project here, that might happen. But I have a tendency just to talk to people in our network if I have extras and either trade them for things or give things away or sell things depending on what it is. Okay, it's time for the main topic of today's show, and that's the dim age feedback. So, YouTube people, if you have any questions, make sure you put them in all caps because I see lots of comments up there, and these eyes are not getting any younger. And if I put my glasses on YouTube, you see what happens? You get glare. Yeah, you get glare. So somebody told me it's better if you can see my eyes, but I actually can't see you very well unless you type your questions in all caps. And I know you like to chat back and forth and like make fun of my background, which is really messy right now. In my studio, I've got my mom's clothes that I washed after she left for to put away in her dresser there and all of that. So it's always a little chaotic around here when we have transition times. So on Monday, I've been wanting to talk about this topic with Vin for a long time, like since he brought it up on the first Unloose the Goose episode, and I just couldn't figure out how to fit it in. And personally, my life last year with the focus of grow was it got really busy in and I didn't manage my time all that well. So I was really excited when he made time for me in December to have the interview, and I'd originally thought, well, I'll play it in January or February because my interview plate has been full. But then I was like, this is an important and much enough topic. Maybe I'll do it in December. And then we had the interview. And I literally recorded it on a Friday thinking, we'll do an interview show today. It'll be this. Nope. Or maybe it was a Monday. I don't know. Nope. After the interview, I thought, okay, once I release the interview, there's going to be lots of thoughtful feedback, questions, comments, and leaving people without support on something as important as Monday's show is not what we do at Living Free in Tennessee. It's just not a good idea. And I think it's important to tap into community to support each other, to share ideas and that sort of thing. And if I was going to release that in December and then go away, I tend to be the connector of y'all. That's part of my role in our community. And I'm not doing you a service. So I waited till yesterday. And then I thought, well, we better have a feedback show. So the foundation of today's discussion is enlightenment. That's the goal. The goal is not fear mongering. The goal is not negativity. The goal is not, oh my God, I'm not ready. Are you ever ready? Are you ever really ready? Right? No. The goal is enlightenment. Let's find the knowledge and understanding so that we can make decisions from that standpoint and not fear. So some of you ask questions that I may not know the answer to, and I may toss them back at you and say, I don't know. Why don't you go look that up and report back to the network? The reason I want to take it from this approach, though, is when you make decisions out of fear, you make the wrong decisions. And usually, I mean, if a Mack truck is coming and it's going to hit you, right? And you're afraid and you jump into the ditch, you might get hurt in the ditch, but you're probably not going to get hurt as badly as with the Mack truck. But if you knew a Mack truck crazy driver just happens to drive through there all the time at 10 a.m. in the morning and then weren't there to begin with, you don't get hurt at all. And that requires knowledge and enlightenment to know about the schedule of the Mack truck. Okay, so that's kind of where I'm coming from. So imagine that you're Jewish. Maybe some of you are. But imagine that you are Jewish and living in Austria as Hitler rises to power. So late 20s, early 30s, last century. He's not your chancellor. He just rose to power. And, Germany's kind of close, right? That place next door is kind of close. But, yeah, that's them. You're here. And you've grown up experiencing some anti-Semitism. It hasn't been that bad. It's been a thing your whole life, and you get it. You've managed to coexist with it. What would you do if it was 1933? People often think they would see what was coming and flee. But I say that's easier said than done. Talking about leaving your whole life with nothing because some guy next door came to power who you don't like. In a world where you've known that there has been an anti-Semitic attitude, right? Or what if you lived in Virginia at the onset of the Civil War? What steps would you take to avoid starvation and death? Because that's kind of, like, it's important to feed yourself and keep your family as healthy as possible. That would be priority number 1, right? Well, that reality is is not one that's really a thing, right? We often look at history and look back knowing what we know now, but they don't know what we know now. Unless you manage to leave, avoiding starvation and death may not be possible, depending on what happens where. And I don't mean that necessarily in terms of the dim age, although I think we're going to have food shortages this year, and that's why I think you really ought to grow the stuff in your garden if you can. If you look at what happened in the U.S. Civil War, in areas where battles were fought, livestock was wiped out, crops were destroyed, and it was hard to survive. And then black markets were springing up because when there's a need, people try to meet that need, and people suffered and people also prospered. But if your plan A was I have 2 pigs who are going to make piggy babies and I'm going to feed them off the land by rotating them through the forest, and in this way I will survive. During the Civil War that didn't work. Turkeys almost went extinct because of overhunting. Because when you're hungry, you do not care about hunting law, and at that time, they didn't really have hunting standards, but when you're hungry, you don't care if you have a deer tag or not, right? You're gonna go shoot that deer. So, yeah, any foundation you set can be destroyed. If you don't have a plan B, then plan A is done, now what? So your mindset is what I think is most important when transitions happen, right? It's your mindset. It's your ability to react and make good decisions, right? Good decisions are what we're looking for. So later in the show, somebody asks which hill should we die on and which ones are silly. It's a really good question. Vin brought up that even the most prepared prepper in the world is not ready for a total lack of inputs. Like if the economy stops delivering things from point A to point B, the way we're built right now, we're not ready. If the internet goes away, how do we communicate? If electricity is not served, what are we going to do to heat our homes if we're dependent on electrical heat? Right? Right now, we're really comfortable. We're scared, but we're comfortable. I buy feed for my animals. If I can't buy feed from the farm that makes the feed, what do I feed my dogs and my pigs? Right? I mean, dogs, maybe I'll be able to hunt enough to get them or let them hunt. I don't know. But it's true that we are not really prepared for a lack of inputs, and we may not get to a situation where there's a lack of inputs. That's why community is so important, because I have a farm and I know who owns the farm and I can buy the feed from that farm and they grow the feed on that farm. Right? If I have 5 of those contacts, I'm even stronger position. So, as we talk about the concept of the dim age and its cycle, I think we need to embrace both the negative things in our current society and be upfront about them. Like, it isn't real stable how we've built our, on demand as needed economy, and the expectation that you don't actually look towards the future and take care of yourself through some basic best practices, food storage or learning how to produce some things. And we live beyond our means, right? Right. We're really lucky because we live beyond our means. And so we have fairly complex lives that maybe need to be simplified. I don't know. Or maybe you need to be ready to be happy with a simplified life. So um, I just think we need to be upfront about the negative things around us now, because change is coming. Change always comes. And the change that's coming right now, like every change I've ever seen happen or read about, we don't fully grasp what that means. We can't. Maybe some of you can, but I can't. And I'm not sure what that means for my day to day. So mindset is what we need to be thinking about here. And then, yeah, taking actions like getting your documentation in order. If I, for whatever reason, have to go live in Germany, and you'll laugh, but if I have to go live in Germany with my friends there for whatever reason, it's not really easy to bring all this stuff around me with me. But if the financial system exists and I have access to the financial system, I can transfer it, right? And only if I know how to get there. If I have to leave quickly, what do I do? That's why I'm getting documentation in order. Okay. So I have 4 questions already on YouTube, and the first one is, how do you create a local community in a new place where you don't know anyone in light of the dim age? My answer to that is, take out in light of the dim age and ask yourself that same question. How do you create a local community? That's what's important. Dim age doesn't matter. You should always have a strong community around you. If you're in a new place, I think the first thing you do is start getting to know people. You don't need to create a community around you. There's one there already. That's the most important thing I think I've learned in the last 10 years here in Tennessee, because I came here with no community, is, okay, yes, I've ended up, quote unquote, building a community at LFTN. I've really just connected communities that already existed, though. And then some people have seen what we have going on and they've come here and they've joined the community, right? And we've given it a name over time. But if you're into homesteading, start at the farmers markets. Go get to know the farmers. Don't be judgy about how they raise their stuff, though. When I first moved here, it was all conventional, like truck gardening. And a number of those guys have gone to more organic practices. And if you get judgy at them, that's not a good way to be a member of the community. I think the question should be, how do I best interact as a new member of a community? And I think it's talk with your ears, ask questions, come in with a servant warrior mindset, meaning you're there to serve, not necessarily to take, and develop the strongest relationships that you can. I have a whole episode on Friday about community. Okay, I'm going to come in with one that came on the MeWe chat, not chat, but post about this. Is from Mia. I thought it was a great episode. Vin isn't a fortune teller, though. I do believe our glory days are coming to an end here in the US. No one knows what the future holds, but we can be sure there will be good times and bad times. We have to be both prepared and positive going forward. So Mia, I agree with you, but I think we're going to see a global effort to turn away from individual freedoms. I think the only thing that results from that is a set of people who are enslaved. And it's a big bummer, right? But I don't think that you need to approach life with a negative attitude because that's happening. I think you need to say, how do I carve out the kind of life I want to live as best I can? How do I add stability? Okay, next question I have is also about community. How do you become this is from Crystal. How do you become a community member when you don't really feel like you are good at making friends or connections with other people? Crystal, just do it. It doesn't matter if you feel like you're good at that or not. Go out, start getting to know people. It's about purposeful input of time. I'm an introvert. Now, I know you're surprised to hear that, right? I'm an introvert. I literally turned my phone off because I was closed for 2 weeks and things kept happening where I was interacting with people, and that's my bad because I was doing them. And I thought, you know what? I need to regenerate. The only way I regenerate is by myself. And I had some heavy things I needed to work through emotionally over the break, and I turned it off. And I didn't answer text messages and stuff. Okay, well, that's not a good way to make friends. I did give people fair warning it was happening. But at the same time, I invest time in being around people to get to know them. That's it. And then I think of questions I can ask. And I mean, the one thing about people is they like to talk about themselves. So if you get them talking about themselves, you don't have to do much. And over time, they'll ask you questions, right? But if you do that, you'll find people who are your people. And when you find people who are your people, you'll make those friends. It's, when we talk about people who instantly make friends with people and they make like 500 friends with no effort, that's not really friends. That's acquaintanceship, right? They're able to interact with and have fun with a bunch of people. True friendship takes time and investment and in development of trust. I had a call from my college roommate this week, and she and I haven't talked much in the last few years. I actually did something I regret years ago where I missed a lunch meeting, and it hurt our friendship a lot. And I wasn't ever sure until the call I had 2 days ago if that's part of why we haven't talked much. But the reality is, and she, like, I didn't address that issue with her directly, although I totally should. Um, she said something at the end of the phone call. She said, "You're my bestie no matter what, even though we don't talk a lot." And I was like, "You know what? Sometimes I don't call her because I don't wanna bother her. Bother her, okay? When you have a friend like that, bother her, and then don't be offended if they don't answer or don't call back. Try again. Just don't beat down their door like an annoying jerk." Okay. Next thing I have, from Bpar from MeWe. Like the episode, it's grim and unnerving, but realistic, I think. I'd like to get more on effective storytelling slash transferring of belief, as I feel that's a skill that will be essential in coming times for our crowds, especially. Okay. Storytelling is something you can get really good at. There's a book called Story by Mick something. I'll put the link in the show notes. Talks about the elements of story. The hero's journey is a style of storytelling that works really well to convey information. You can learn about the fundamentals of that, then go listen to good storytellers. Vin's a really good storyteller, right? Listen to how long they tell stories. I think the biggest mistake I see people make in storytelling is they take a long time telling the story. That's great if you're a comedian and can keep me interested in the story the whole time, but a story can be told in 30 seconds. A story can be told in 10 seconds. A story can be told in 1 minute. And if you find yourself doing a 15-minute monologue, ignore the fact you're listening to me just talk to my microphone right now. Um, think about that and think about how you can be a better storyteller. Get the relevant information without too much extraneous detail. You want some color, but this idea of transferring belief, I'm not sure what you mean by that. Persuasion, perhaps. Stories persuade people because it reaches them emotionally. And when you reach people emotionally and then follow it up with something they can use to justify it, just sort of to okay, here's the story, I've got you emotionally, and then here's a fact that makes you believe that it's credible, that persuades them. But if the opposing team comes back with an equally emotional story and a fact, they're persuaded the other way. People who are persuaded like that, most people, are manipulated. That's what we're seeing in our societies. People who are trapped into manipulation through storytelling, narrative, and that's most of us. And I would say even me, I fall into it. I'm just conscious that it exists as a thing, and I actively try to resist it, but that doesn't mean I successfully do. And I think it's important to look at that yourself. Like some of the things we're spouting as fact in sort of the freedom perspective that we're like, why don't you get it yet? That's because we've been brainwashed too. When we know too much about something, it's hard. If you come at something with a child's mind and start talking about it, that works really well. But I can tell you this, the most long-term lasting change of perspective or opinion I've seen people go through, that's done over time through multiple interactions with time for people to process things. And it's usually initiated by the person who changes their mind. So I don't think yelling louder works. And the freedom movement just yells louder, and that's never worked. Listening. Listening and understanding people's perspectives, I think, it helps. And then being willing to admit when putting your effort there doesn't work, doesn't help, right? You can spend hours and hours and hours trying to convince your mother-in-law that the end is near in California and they need to leave. Well, sorry, Charlie. If your mother-in-law wants to stay in California, she's going to. And if you keep bringing it up and keep harping on it, all that does is serve to ruin your relationship. But I can tell you this, my sister is a smart person, thinking, likes to take care of her family, knew that I was prepping, thought it was a little strange, but not, she loves me, so whatever. And then during a fire, like a wildfire, their electricity got shut off for a long time. And it made her think. They had fun, they have camping gear, they're fine. They didn't have much in the fridge, it was fine. It got her to think, though, what if that had been the city water? Maybe I should store some water. And then she called me and asked because she knew I did that, but I'd never pushed it on her. And so she felt comfortable asking. So I would say this: find a way for people to be comfortable asking if you want to persuade them. Talk about it like I talk about things on podcasts and that makes people ask me things, right? Talk about it in a way people can hear you. And then you become a better persuader. Okay, next question I have is from YouTube. Thoughts on how to move forward when a spouse has heard the truth but remains in denial? My last question is basically the same thing. Your spouse is an important part of your life. And denial is part of the process of processing this, right? It's one of the stages of grief, 7 stages of grief, denial. But because they're your spouse, if you push on them, Lee, they're going to stay in denial longer. So then think about what your end goal is. What do you mean by move forward? Is move forward go live in a teepee in the woods? They're not going to do that if you're in a nice house in suburbia. But if your path forward is to increase the ability to grow things at home off your land or your yard, that doesn't require spousal support really from a prepper standpoint. You just have a new hobby, right? And if they're not supportive of you having a new hobby, might be time for some counseling in your marriage. I don't know. But I think if you come at it from the I'm trying to persuade you to go my way, like that's just, if you tell me I'm doing things wrong, my first reaction is no, I'm not. If you're my spouse and I actually care about you and you tell me that, it's a way bigger no, I'm not, right? So be careful with that one. Be careful with that one. But think about what your end goal is with that. What do you mean by move forward? Analyze if your definition of move forward is reasonable. I read something about somebody who wanted to quit their job and was mad because their spouse wasn't supportive and had no plan about what they do after they quit their job, and they were the income earner and the spouse was taking care of the kids. Well, you don't just pull a trigger on that, right? That doesn't, they've got to find a job. It's got to pay enough to pay the bills. If you haven't been in the workforce for a long time, it's hard to find a job like that. Right now, it can be hard to find a job. You know what I'm saying? So they hadn't thought about that other perspective. Really try to understand your spouse's perspective and then figure out step by step what you can do to move forward. Their denial shouldn't matter. And they may be in less denial than you know. Okay, next one comes from Mia. I'm curious if there is a correlation to the Mayan calendar. It is a symbol that has seemed to follow me throughout my life. I was pretty pumped for 2012. Okay, that's one I'm handing back to you. I don't know. Look at the Mayan calendar and report back to us, because that is not an area of expertise for me, and I didn't feel like researching that one today. Plus, if you're following the Mayan calendar, I'm just saying, you should already know this. Okay. Next one comes from YouTube. How can you deal with a spouse who's aware that bad things are on the horizon, but has no interest in taking action to prep and actively discourages my effort? That is the same question I already answered, so hopefully my answer helped you, Beth. Next one comes from Kurt. What unsavory aspects of the coming troubles might be wise to embrace? Example, the vaccine, wearing a mask, government education, government health insurance. That is a question only you can answer for yourself, Kurt. I really think it's the only one you can answer, but I think it's a really good one to start thinking about now. When I've been thinking about so in college, I I did a big old deep dive. German literature, German language major. I did a big old deep dive on like Hitler's rise to power and what was going on with arts during that time and how arts were kind of co-opted by the government and then used as a propaganda arm. And it was I wrote a thesis about it that I can't find, and my conclusion was the place we are likely to see that kind of fascist meltdown again is the US. And now here we are, right? And so what unsavory aspects of the coming a lot of us go along to get along. And so, like, I don't wanna I was at New Year's Eve dinner at a friend's restaurant, I didn't wanna have him get all health inspectored out, so I'm wearing a mask from the doorway to my table, which is dumb because then when you get to your table, you can take your mask off, right? Um, I think that's an individual thing you have to answer. So people around me in the community have already stopped. They won't wear a mask, they won't get a vaccine, they've already got their kids out of government education. They've already realized that when they get sick, they're gonna die because the health insurance and health system is not going to be accessible to them, and they are actively retreating. There's a hybrid that can happen though, right? If you look at how Anne Frank was hidden in an attic, there were the people hiding her who interacted in the community and then used what they could to help the people secretly. Or with the Underground Railroad, same thing, right? So, personally, I'm more of a hybrid. Am I getting the vaccine? No. When I know more about the vaccine, would I consider getting it? Much like a tetanus shot, okay. But, I mean, that's years from now that I could even make that decision, right? Do I wear a mask to get things done? Yeah, that means I can do supply runs. Am I putting my kids in government education? Doesn't matter. I think it's a bad idea. I think eventually that's gonna be like a trap. Um, have I opted out of government health insurance? A long time ago, and I'm not willing to go back. I think when we get socialized medicine here or single payer, as they like to call it, I'm gonna have some hard decisions to make because I'm at an age where breast cancer is runs in the family and likely to happen. Not likely, but possible, like increased reliance on it. So I'm just gonna have to make that decision. I don't know. I think that's something you need to sit down and decide. For me, the vaccine is going too far. I've also have reasons that any vaccine is going too far for several vaccines, right? So that's a personal decision I've made. For me, giving up my privacy is a line in the sand. Giving up my privacy, although I've given up a lot more than I ever thought I would. So it's part of my documentation is just assessing where I'm at. It's part of why I don't wanna use Instagram anymore, and I'm looking at getting off Facebook, right? Might be off YouTube eventually. Hi, YouTube. Are you spying on me? Okay, next one comes from Van. Um, that episode was great. Vin illustrates recurring patterns with great flair. As a Christian, I find the Salem witch trials horrifying and a major black eye perpetrated by those who profess to love as Jesus loved. Okay, so Christianity, things have been done in the name of Christianity that are terrible. Things have been done in the name of Christianity that are wonderful. Gotcha. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Anytime you have an organized community, humans involved, things are going to happen. And when the kinds of people who are willing to, in the name of having more power for themselves, hurt or enslave other people, get into positions of power in any community, it you know, it's a thing that happens. That's what we're seeing now, and there are enough of those kinds of people in the world that I mean, they exist. As I said on my episode Monday, it's hard for me to accept that those people exist, but they do. Okay, this one's from Hat. Is the approach of the dim age accelerating, or is it just that my imagination? I see, like, TSA pre as a sign of divide and conquer, right? Just setting up 2 classes of people. So is it accelerating? I think it always does, right? Like, you start with a slow burn and, eh, as different steps happen, right, the steps get bigger, and so, sure, we're taking a bigger step up. Will it go back down, though? It might. It's kinda like the stock market, right? We can go shooting up, and then it can crash, and there's some hope, and then, you know, one of the things I think about after my conversation with Vin is, do we wanna stop it? I don't know that we do. If it's part of our natural human cycle, do we need to stop it? Or do we need to learn what we can from that, from the dim age, and check ourselves and check our expectations and focus on the spiritual for a while as a society? I mean, morally speaking, we've taken a lot of strange steps on our way here. And by morally speaking, a moral foundation is really important for communities to interact with each other. And I don't mean like sex before marriage or anything. I basically, um, I'm talking about like, if I give you my word, do I keep my word? We live in a society where we don't, right? Technology has made it so when you agree to meet me in a certain time in a certain place, you don't have to anymore because you can reach me with this device called a cell phone, and you can change the plans all the time. Well, that frankly drives me nuts. But you're breaking your word when you change it, and I'm guilty of it, right? So I think being able to trust people is important, and when we break our word, we break our word. Okay, let's see. Next one is Emily. Just finished listening to Monday's podcast. I think it was so interesting. I'm still trying to digest it. Good. Keep digesting that. Thank you for putting out content that stretches us. It's stretching me too. So, um, I sent one thing in particular to Vin, that somebody sent me via email, and he said, "I'm glad to see he gets it." And I was like, "I don't even know if I get it, honestly." But I know that if we don't look at it, we'll never get it. And so I take your time to digest. Will the act of embracing bits of it accelerate it even more? From YouTube, Hat. I think you embracing bits of it and becoming the gray man, which operates in both sides of it, if that's what you choose to do, is not what's accelerating it. What's accelerating it is that masses of people have never thought critically. Masses of people have never thought critically. We just thought they were because they parroted back critical thinking like things, right? So that's where I'm with Vin on this one. We can't stop it. And if you stand in front of it, it's going to crush you. But we do have to stand for something. What do we stand for? And I think that's the most important question is what do we stand for? So, what are odd hills to die on? From Kurt. What are the logical hills to die on? Again, that's a personal thing. Um, for me, privacy. The vaccine removes privacy. Having a vaccine passport on my phone removes privacy. We've just found my line. I may never get to go to Germany again and see my friends because they may require a fucking oops, excuse my French. Sorry guys who have family members around. Um, Vaccine passport, and I'm not doing it. My body, my choice. Whatever happened to that, right? Throw their words back at him, by the way. They sputter. It's really funny to watch. Another one from Kurt. I love the yellow star idea. I'm torn on trying to wake people up at this point. I doubt how effective it would be, but I can't take Vin's position without feeling negligent. I don't think this will play out over generations. History does appear to cycle, but every cycle seems to play out faster than the previous. I wonder if previous cycles were cycles. When I read that, Kurt, I was like, well, when was the really last cycle of this? Or is this all part of one cycle? Was World War II a cycle? Or was it, 7 or 800 years ago that was a real cycle where we went into a really dim age for a long time? Um, I could be wrong, but I actually see this as hundreds of years and not 100 years cycle. And that doesn't mean there wasn't pain and suffering, but I think what happened in World War I and World War II and through, the communism and those sorts of things, I think that's all been moving towards a cycle. It's just getting incrementally worse, and, here we are. We'll see what happens. I could be wrong. That's Nicole Sauce's take. I'm not a historian, but that is my take. Okay. Kurt had a lot of ones. Okay, this one is from Lee. By the way, guys, on YouTube, if you have any other questions, get them in soon because we're going to wrap up. I have 2 more on mine. My name is Lee. I'm a newer listener. I have a lot to learn. I'm excited about making slow progress forward. I have a follow-up from Monday's interview with Vin Armani. I've been reading, listening to various podcasts, and thinking about a lot of what's going on right now. The lockdowns, increasing reach of government powers, mass or mask hysteria, the Great Reset, but also building skills and joining freedom cells. It seems a lot relies on the internet and social media to coordinate and disseminate. What if the main distribution channel of disinformation is unavailable? Why has no one talked about blacking out the internet? We've seen this happen in other countries. How do you roll out FedCoin if there's no electronic means to transmit it? How could this change the trajectory of what's unfolding? If I use Vin's example of the extermination of the Jews as an example, how would things have been different if early on the underground destroyed the rail lines in Germany? And a quick plug for Lionel Stryver's book, The Mandibles, published in 2016. Eerily prescient. That's a word I don't say very well. It's one I don't actually use very often. Nice word. Thank you. So my feedback on that is that I think we need to prepare for the internet to go away. I don't think we should launch an initiative to bomb the internet. You are right. If society moves towards increased digitization, they don't want the internet to go away, right? They want to use it to monitor us. The question is, will we have access to it? Not if it exists. And then if we don't have access to it, what are we doing? How do we communicate? Are we back to like sending ponies with people with letters? Are we just going to go word of mouth? Are we just going to go to little pods of people who don't communicate with anybody? I don't know. Does the gray man role interfere? This is actually something that's going to be talked about at the Freedom Cell event on the 16th, because if the internet goes away, my coffee business goes out of business, my podcast goes away, and most of the information I have at my fingertips is gone. Okay. To make up for that, I have some reference materials here. That's all I got. And I have people who I know where they live and I can go talk to them. That's all I got right now. There's got to be a better way. So I agree. I think it's important to think about what if the internet goes away, but I don't think it is just going to be turned off, although it might. I think it's more like it'd be a slow bleed where you either can't afford your internet service, or unless you have certain social points, you can't use the internet to get certain information. And if I look at how other regimes have come into power and tightened down, what they try to control is your access to information, whether it be taking away and burning books about, philosophy or whatever, or history, whether it be certain special people have access to certain materials and others don't, or whether it be the words you're allowed to say. If you haven't seen, was it Bruce Willis meets communism or something? Was it Bruce Willis? No, Chuck Norton meets versus communism, which is on Amazon Prime and really hard to find on there with your Fire Stick, but I finally found it. I had to go on the internet, find it, add it to my videos I want to watch, and then I could come. But if I did the search on the Amazon Fire Stick with their search tool, it didn't come up. Anyway, Chuck Norton Brian Norton, Chuck Norris versus communism was really interesting to watch because you see how they were censoring movies and things, but then also what was and what was not allowed to be said out loud to your neighbors who might be spying on you. That's why privacy is so important. That's why my hill to die on is privacy, right? I think it's important to choose your hill to die on. I think privacy is the one. I mean, there are parts of my life that are never going to be private, but um, privacy is really important. Okay. Any other questions from YouTube before I wrap up, guys? Because I strategically chose this last one to end on, and so okay. Well, you haven't gotten a question up there in 3 minutes. Sucks to be you. You'll have to do this on a new show. So then the last one comes from Carrie, who is from our network. He's a permaculture designer, and he's recently realized he could be debt free and moved to a much simpler life to do that. That's commitment. Okay. He says this: congratulations on the most depressing yet inspiring podcast yet. Yes. Carrie, I feel the same way about that show. I was like, oh, but it's good, but oh, right? For years, I've been digging into the topics Vin discussed. My career as an EMS brought me face first into the realities of our society and how things are changing. It's not pretty. In a single shift, I could interact with people who literally were living on dirt floors and then respond to a penthouse apartment and knock over a vase worth more than my yearly salary. I've watched the medical, social, government systems fail to address even the most basic needs. I have seen some systems take away freedoms because someone was simply accused of a victimless crime. We haven't even talked about how we enslave our own people, and slavery still exists in the US. It's called our prison systems. It's not quite you get caught smoking pot and you're a slave for the rest of your life, but it can be. If you have too much pot with you, they consider you a dealer, and you can be just locked away for having done nothing that hurt anybody. And then they're using your labor for like $1 a day or something crazy, or paying you $1.40 a day. I don't know if that's the rate. Somebody who's been in prison can correct me. And then in that way, they can outbid private sector contracts because they have this free slave labor or very low cost slave labor. We allow that to happen. That's bullshit that we allow that to happen, but we allow that to happen. And those have and have nots is set up by our societal system. And it's set up by our legal system. And it is set up by our system of government. And because things, people who are like, I won't do that because it's illegal. It's wrong because it's illegal. Okay, well, we changed the law and now it became legal. Now it's okay. Yeah. What? Okay, that's a problem. So we actually, as a society, accept somebody with addiction problems, which is something we should maybe have some compassion and help them with, is bad, has broken a law, and therefore needs to be locked away. That's very different than somebody who is abusing children, right? Very different, but, doesn't affect me, so I'll let it go on. Okay, several years ago, I began reading the work of John Michael Greer. He's written dozens of topics, but his work on the history of civilizations and their inevitable decline is among his best. To surmise, every civilization experiences an arced timeline, a rise, a peak, and a fall. Because of our access to petroleum, our particular civilization has shot through the timeline especially quickly. We probably experienced our peak around the 1950s. Since then, things have begun losing cohesion, and it continues to accelerate. So what's happening, horrifying as it is, was essentially meant to happen. We just all happen to be here when it's happening. I keep going back to that musical that I can't think of the name of right now. It's a founding father's name, like Hamilton. There we go. Sometimes my brain works funny. Hamilton, and how excited people are to be a part of history during the revolution. I'm like, that all happened real quickly all of a sudden, and then it didn't happen quickly. But you know what I mean? Like, that's not, well, we're there again. We're there again. I don't mean revolution war, although maybe that'll happen, but more like we're there and stuff is changing rapidly, and it is what it is, right? My grandma lived through the Depression. Things happened quickly then too. Her like, my ancestors fled Europe to come here, a lot of them. Things were happening fast then. So, the funny thing about this, and this is where I think you can get a lot of comfort. It's not new. As Vin said, if you find what story's being told, you can figure out what's gonna happen. And, okay, this is where I am in the story. Well, this is what I wanna do as part of that story, so here I'll go, right? You can try to change the story, but that's a lot more work. It's better to figure out where you are in the story and make your path as best you can, right? Um, Greer also writes on the religion of progress. Almost all of us belong to the religion of progress, though we don't realize it. It's very hard to contemplate that things aren't always going to get better. And in my lifetime, Carrie, things have gotten worse. I'm very blessed with a great family, but the life opportunities that have happened in my life versus my parents are very different. And I don't even mind. Like, I know. I know what it is. Um, Although they started out harder than I did because of relative prosperity of them growing, where they were in society. Like, I started with a leg up and people after me started with an even bigger leg up, but now when they lose that, it's like worse. And it's so much more painful for them because they didn't have to go through the pain of getting there, a lot of people in the US anyway. We're probably not going to colonize the solar system this time around anyway. Maybe we will, who knows? We're already talking about aliens, come on now. And Star Trek isn't our future. I suggest that the very first prep is not to get comfortable with the idea that broad sweeping change for the better is not coming. I'm sorry. I suggest the first prep is to get comfortable with the idea that broad sweeping change for the better is not coming. So he's talking about religion of progress, and then always expecting things to get better. If you are comfortable with the idea that that might not happen, you're in a lot better place to make decisions for yourself that are based in reason and not out of fear, right? Because when things don't get better, now what, right? Well, maybe they are getting better for you. Maybe you just have to choose the right path, but don't expect it to get better for everybody all the time. I think that's a really good piece of advice. Realizing that progress is just a construct is like going through the stages of grief. It's rough, but you'll come out on the other side wiser and a more resilient person. Another step that we have got to get a handle on is fear. I totally agree. I think that maybe the most important aspect here. It's so clear how people are being manipulated through fear. I don't have much advice here except say that you have to make yourself do hard things. This is coming from someone who wrestles with fear constantly. Okay, we all wrestle with fear constantly, Carrie. And I think a couple of things. You're going to die. You don't know when you're gonna die. You don't know how you're gonna die. You can, set yourself up so that's just a thing because we are finite beings, right? In our bodies, like, we're gonna die. Once you accept that and don't fear, like, the constant, "Is this gonna kill me? Is this gonna kill me? Is this gonna kill me?" You're actually way better off. And I went through a really deep mortality fear in my 20s that I got through. And my ability to make decisions when I was in that was really hard, and I think that's where a lot of people are. I think why you see strong denial is people haven't dealt with their mortality, the fact that it is a thing. So, the other thing that Carey writes about, and I'm not gonna read his exact words, is being satisfied with a simpler life. Being satisfied with a simpler life really helps you. So, if you don't need all the boops and bops and constant entertainment and, um, whatever, really expensive house that doesn't make sense to heat, if you don't need that, it's a lot easier when change comes. And one of the things I talk to people about is, and this is actually why I've gotten back into backpacking. Go out and backpack for a week. Start with an overnight and then build up to a week. When you're backpacking, everything you have, including your food, is on your back. And you realize that you can be warm, you can get water, you can be fed with very little of the constructs we have around ourselves for our own comfort. Reality is, buying food is what we do in our society, right? But if you get to know the forest and build skills over time, like fishing and hunting and wild edible plants, you can actually do pretty well in certain parts of the world, in particular, just living day to day with what's there. If you have land you can cultivate, you can put effort into that. And, a lot of us consume more than we need to, right? I'm looking at my liquor cabinet over here. Like, I don't have to have alcohol, but I like it, right? I don't have to have a cocktail, but I like it from time to time. But when you backpack, you realize how simple you can live. And when you realize that, it's empowering because then you're less worried about the what if I lose my house? Okay, well, what if you do lose your house? Where are you going to live next? How are you going to live? Caveman had a great idea because that keeps you relatively dry and warmer, right? Than just a tent in the woods. But a tent in the woods ain't bad. Like, I literally could grab the backpack that my mom gave me and walk out the door in 5 minutes. And while I wouldn't have everything I need forever, I'm pretty well equipped. The one thing I can't do right now is filter water with that. But I can deal with food. I have my shelter taken care of. So a simpler life is not bad. And if you start looking at the things in your life that aren't simple and assessing whether you really need them or not, is it a need to have or a nice to have? And then do I even like it? I don't watch. It's funny. People make movie references because they love watching movies. And they go right over my head because since the mid 90s, while I have seen some movies, I haven't, like, been in that culture of watch the shows, watch the movies. I don't watch television. I just finished Tales from the Green Valley, a YouTube series, that's really good. You should totally watch it if you wanna learn about simple living. But what I figured was that if I spend lots of time watching these movies, which are entertaining, and if that's your bag, then that's great, then I don't do other things that I like to do. And so if my choice is go for a kayak or stay home and watch a movie, maybe today I would stay home and watch a movie because it's really cold out there. But, in the summertime, I'm going to go kayaking. Or if my choice is make salsa and can it or watch a movie, I'm going to make salsa and can it because I like doing things with my hands. And if my choice is read about something and learn about something or watch a video about it, I actually will read because I absorb information better when I read. That's just me. And I think we have to look at that and figure out what we're doing to distract ourselves versus what we're doing because we want some entertainment and we have chosen to have this entertainment, right? There's a difference there. And as you do that, you realize that a lot of simple things make you happy. I'm going to leave you with this. One of my good friends, and Carrie, by the way, thanks for that. That was a really good, thoughtful email. One of my best friends asked his mom, oh, no, I'm sorry, his grandma, what's different today? When she was near the end, right? What's different today than when you were a kid? And she said, when I was a kid, we could entertain ourselves without spending money. Now people have to spend money to entertain themselves. So, like, paying money to go to a movie at the time period he asked her, I think it was in the 80s. And what they did as kids to entertain themselves, like teenage kids, was make a picnic and go. Go walk in the woods, get together and have a dance, but it didn't cost money. They knew how to entertain themselves for free. So, guys, start learning. If you've forgotten, start learning how to entertain yourself for free. You'll find really quickly that a lot of stuff you used to do as a kid is really fun and it does not cost money. Like playing badminton. That's really fun. Okay, yes, you have to buy the equipment once, but then once you have it, every time somebody wants to go out and bat that birdie around, it's fun. Or playing chess, or any of the myriad of things you can do that can be fun. I was actually today talking to somebody about, like, just what I'm doing right now. I'm making homesteading projects. I have sauerkraut going. I have I'm straightening and neatening and setting up my household differently so it's more functional for me. I am reading about weeds and going out in the yard and weeding and getting ground ready, and that's like not easy work when you're digging and stuff. And I was moving firewood around. So I moved firewood from where it was out in the open air because it had just been split and cut down to size to where it is undercover so I can use it in the house. And somebody rolled their eyes and they were like, "Oh, that sounds like a terrible job." I like moving firewood. I like it. You know why? Because, it's something physical, and it I do it without, like, other things going on, and I can just sort of be in my head and think about things and look at the world, but also, later, I have the firewood that's dry, and it heats my house. So I actually like tasks like that, and that seems completely inaccessible to some of my friends. They don't get it. And part of it is because I've learned to to not turn it into a terrible chore, right? But also, I've just learned to enjoy simpler things, and what I'm enjoying about that is I get to be by myself. I get to get a little bit of physical activity, which is good for me. I get to be in the fresh air, and at the same time, I'm moving something forward, and I love moving things forward. So, at the end of the day, and I said this a couple of times as people asked questions, what you should do after Monday's episode comes down to you, and it's an individual choice. And, if you have taken time to listen to that episode and process it, I'm proud of you because there were parts of that that were hard to think about, right? Because we don't like to think about bad things. Um, but that doesn't mean you have to make your life any different than it is right now. Maybe you do, but that comes down to you. It's a personal choice. Your analysis of risks, your analysis of what story we're in, what desired outcomes you want. It will always be you, and it has always been you. And our world has been very unstable the whole time we thought it was stable. I, as a podcaster, have tremendous power to influence as a personality what you choose to do next. And I choose not to do that. I choose to ask you to think about this situation. Think about what you can do. Think about the role that you play in the story. What role do you want to play? And then what does that mean? Because when you're a hero, heroes often die, right? If that's your role, great. If that's not your role, great. It's just important that you make your decision for you each day about how you react to the world. And embracing a simple life is one of the ways I choose to do this. That's why I talk about living the simple life here, right? Helping people relearn survival skills is another way I do this. And I also operate in the societal system around me. But I've learned how to use cryptocurrency, right? Just saying. Spring workshop's coming. If you want to pay with crypto, you better reach out. Actually, I'll have a way for you to reach out on that one on the registration page. For me, it makes sense with my understanding of where we are right now and where we're going to live simply. And I love my life. I love moving firewood around. So it totally makes sense. But I live a quite unique life that some people don't understand why I do it. And most of my fun time is spent gathering, nurturing, preserving, and learning. I want a life where I learn all the time. If I could have stayed in college my whole life, I probably would because it was so fun to learn stuff. But that's not everybody's bag. And as Carrie says, I have found my people. He said, the most important thing is to find your people and continue to find more. I have found my people. I continue to find more. And that is one of my biggest areas of satisfaction. I'm not sure if that's the right word, is that our community, it's growing slowly, but it's quality. And I had a choice way back when about how fast do we grow. For me, it wasn't how fast do I grow. It's not how many listeners do I have, right? Um, I'm excited by how many listeners we have now versus when we started, but it's got to be the right ones, or there's no point. Otherwise, I'm pandering and we're not unifying as a cohesive group. So Friday, we're going to talk about foundational principles of strong communities, and I hope you will look forward to that episode. I know a lot of you on YouTube had questions about building community. Friday, I don't answer all your questions about building community, but I talk about foundational principles. I've already done the show notes, so I already know what I'm going to say because I did those notes and these notes. I just didn't want to make another 3-hour episode. So be sure to tune in then. I will also live record that on YouTube. That's something I do unless there's an interview or unless I'm really tired. And in December, I was really tired. So I pulled back on the live streaming, but we're backing up Monday, Wednesday, Friday, unless it's an interview day. This Friday is not an interview day, so we will live stream record the podcast on Friday. Also, the Living Free in Tennessee Spring Workshop is April 23rd, 22nd through 24th in Lancaster, Tennessee. That's about an hour east of Nashville. And we have some really cool speakers, guys. When you hear who's going to speak at this, you're going to like your mind, you're going to be like mind blown. It's going to be a great workshop. There are limited tickets though. So I am opening up ticket sales on the 15th of January to members and then on the 18th of January to the public. And when they're gone, they're gone. We'll have a wait list, but that kind of is what it is. So one way you can support the show is by becoming a member. If you are already a member, just make sure you're not expiring like on the 14th of January. And if you have any trouble with the portal, let me know. It's a little hinky. We've been going through an upgrade on it that will be launched and it will be better after that. But make sure you can get in there because, like, literally, you're going to have to log in to get it. And I'm launching it on the 15th and then driving to Roan Mountain, which means tech support on that day might be a little weird depending on my access to internet. The other way you can support the show is to buy your coffee at Hollow Roast. That's hollowroast.com. We roast to order so you don't get stale coffee. And your support there has really been what's allowed me to transition into a simpler life. So thanks for that. With that, go out, make it a great week. Stopping the Garage Band. Okay, guys, if you enjoyed this and you're not already a subscriber on YouTube, give me a subscribe. Maybe share it with your friends as well, because as we get closer to the magic number of 1,000, exciting things happen. What exciting things? I'm not sure anymore because YouTube changes stuff all the time. But I really appreciate you, and I see that news outlets are reporting that protesters have entered the Capitol building. This is what's interesting about when you go on like a news break. I've been on a news break all day today. My plan is to get all the way through Unloose the Goose without looking at the news. But I already know that protesters have stormed the Capitol building. When important things happen, your friends tell you. Counting of the Electoral College votes has stopped. Breaking news. We didn't see that one coming, did we, guys? Yes, we did. Okay, anyway, thanks for sharing that with me, E. E? Is your name E? You don't be sorry to be the one to tell me. It's okay for me to know. It's just if I read the headlines, then I'll read the articles and I'll get sucked in and then I will waste time because I decided today, and it was my own personal decision because I'm like a total political junkie. Like that's actually my like mindless entertainment is that from my past life. That I couldn't afford the time to entertain myself with watching this happen. And I don't mean that like, yay, I want to see us melt down into civil war. That's not what I mean. I mean, watching the play-by-play like I did on election night for president. If I did that, what I wouldn't do is a good job on this podcast and then a good job on Unloose the Goose. We are recording Unloose the Goose at 4:30, and we're talking about winter food, growing winter food. And then we have some feedback from the depression episode that I was going to ask some questions of the gaggle. So Xavier Hawk, though, is there right now, E, and I haven't heard from him today, so hopefully he's okay. If we can port him in for the show for a bit, we will. But don't be sorry about telling me. It's, as I said, when important things happen, people tell you, and that's probably an important thing. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and we will see you on what day? Friday. It's Wednesday. See you Friday. Bye.